the election was stolen by more people voting for Donald Trump. It's quite a caper. Ocean's 74 million.
These days, it's almost a trend to watch. Die-hard leftists rip into Democrats for last year's humiliating defeat.
Trump spoke to the people. Democrats never once mentioned Arnold Palmer's never once.
At this rate, don't be surprised if they vote for the center or even the right. The newest voice joining the leftist, pylon, comedian Jon Stewart. He argues the DNC and their media lapdogs are clueless hacks who fuel Kamala Harris's election disaster. So, if sharp, political fire is your thing, smash, subscribe, and let's dive in.
I guess you'd call it America. Was that we had all been told by many of our best prognosticators it was going to be close.
Jon Stewart kicked things off by tearing into the so-called experts who spent months assuring everyone that the election would be razor-thin with Kamala Harris ultimately pulling off the victory with his trademark sarcasm. Stewart mocked their smug certainty, pointing out how wildly out of touch the predictions were with reality. These pundits, armed with charts, polls, and plenty of arrogance, convinced the public that Harris had momentum she never actually possessed. Stewart didn't just ridicule their bad math. He exposed their wishful thinking and blind loyalty to the Democratic establishment, making it clear they were selling fantasy, not facts.
We ran the results in the computer 100,000 times. She won 50,001. He won 40,099, 99. But in this coin flip country, I was confident because the Democrats had a secret weapon in a close election.
The reason so many pundits and political insiders were confidently calling the election for the Democrats came down to one thing: the so-called secret weapon of the DNC, Kamala Harris. Party strategists and their media allies were convinced that Harris was the ace up their sleeve, the candidate who could magically swing the race in their favor. They marketed her as history in the making, the first black female president, and assumed that identity alone would be enough to carry her across the finish line.
Since joining the race, the vice president has raised an eye-boggling $1 billion.
Call me eyes boggled. See, the Democrats in a 50-50 election had $1 billion.
For months, talking heads repeated the same narrative. America would rally around Harris not because of her policies or her track record, but because of what her candidacy symbolized. They treated the election like a coronation, selling the idea that representation automatically equaled popularity and that demographics alone could substitute for substance. But here's the problem. Voters weren't buying it. Everyday Americans cared less about token history-making moments and more about rising costs, weak leadership, and real issues that affected their lives. Instead of being the DNC's secret weapon, Harris turned into a glaring liability, exposing just how out of touch the so-called experts and strategists really were.
A war chest to be spent on data analytics and polling and consultants and very clearly texting. There was a lot of texting. A lot of that money went to, how the did they just text me? I'm in the tub.
The Democrats blew through staggering amounts of cash during the election cycle, and one of the most baffling strategies was their obsession with texting. Millions of dollars were funneled into blasting out generic messages that most people either ignored, deleted, or blocked. It was crazy. Money that could have been invested in sharpening their messaging, clarifying their agenda, or addressing the issues that actually mattered to everyday voters was instead wasted on spammy texts that irritated more people than they convinced.
The Harris campaign has a massive ground game, 50,000 volunteers.
With volunteers knocking on 5 million doors in Pennsylvania alone.
This is the first time some Democrats have told me they've ever heard of people knocking on the same doors a second time.
But that wasn't the only misstep. A significant portion of their war chest also went into hiring armies of volunteers to go door to door, parroting talking points and begging people to support Kamala Harris. The irony, most of those volunteers were ill-prepared to answer real questions about policy, and the intrusion often backfired, leaving voters more annoyed than persuaded.
Even though everyone from vacuum salesmen to Jehovah's Witnesses know that's a losing strategy. In fact, they've known that for decades. Let's just spend $250 million on it.
The strategy revealed a broader problem. Within the DNC, they confuse activity with effectiveness instead of putting resources into refining Harris's image, articulating a clear vision, or countering Republican attacks. They burned through funds on shallow tactics that looked impressive on paper, but delivered almost nothing in reality. In the end, their massive spending spree exposed just how disconnected the Democrats were from the voters they desperately needed to win over.
But the reason why, and I give them some shit for their strategies, but there was a method to the Democrats' madness.
Democracy and freedom are on the ballot.
Our democracy is on the line.
We have to protect democracy.
We have to work even harder to make sure that we defend our democracy.
Stewart then went after one of the Democrats' most recycled talking points, the claim that Donald Trump was some kind of budding autocrat who would plunge America straight into fascism if given another term in power. For years, the DNC and their media allies leaned heavily on this scare tactic, churning out endless headlines and cable news segments warning of dictatorship, coups, and the end of democracy itself. Their representatives practically camped out on mainstream media, painting Trump as a cross between Mussolini and Darth Vader, hoping fear alone would push voters into Kamala Harris's corner.
We don't get to choose when we're asked to defend democracy. We just have to do it. And this is not a drill.
Noble words. And I'm glad to say Democrats did protect democracy. Just for the other side.
But Stewart wasn't buying it, and neither were most Americans. He pointed out the absurdity of the narrative, mocking the overblown hysteria that made Democrats look desperate rather than credible. After all, if every election is the end of democracy, the phrase stops meaning anything. Instead of persuading undecided voters, the constant drumbeat of doom became background noise, easy to tune out. Stewart's criticism cut to the heart of the issue. The Democrats didn't have a compelling vision of their own, so they tried to scare people with exaggerated monsters under the bed